Chapter 1 begins on page 2, but there are no page numbers for it. There's just a picture of this beautiful bristlecone tree. And on page 3, there's the yellow page that says Chapter 1 and Introduction. This chapter, the text actually begins on page 4 and it ends on page 9, so the text itself is about 5 pages long. And before I start reading, we really need to take a survey of our chapter so that we know what we're going to read about in this chapter. So turn your books to page 4 really quickly. And notice on page 4, there's introduction written in black letters. And then the section heading is in yellow and it says life science. And that section heading for life science takes up all of page 4 and all of page 5. Turn to page 6, please. At the top of page 6, we have a section heading in yellow called the scientific method. Then halfway through page 6, we've got another section heading called controlled experiments. On page 7, down at the bottom, we have another section heading called graphing. Turn to page 8, please. On page 8, there's a yellow section heading called using this text correctly, and that takes up the rest of page 8 and all of page 9, so that's the end of the chapter. So those are the major headings, the major units, or the major themes that we're going to be talking about in this chapter. So now turn back to the page with the bristlecone tree on it, which is actually page 2, and look at the bristlecone tree. And then on page 3, it says introduction, and underneath that there's a quote by Francis Bacon, and it says, "Wonder is the seed of knowledge." At the bottom of page 3, there's some information about the bristlecone tree, and it says that many of them live for almost 5,000 years. Turn to page 4, please. Sit up in learner's position, follow along with your eyes and with your finger along the words if you can. Life science. Life science is an attempt to understand the varied world of living things, and of which you and I are a part. A world inhabited by invisible creatures, some able to kill the strongest among us, some giving us an advantage over the killers. A world in which the tallest living thing is higher than you, standing on top of me, and 76 of your friends on top of that. And there's that tree. See on figure 1.2, there's that huge tall tree, but look down way at the bottom, the little tiny person. Do you see that? And that's how big this tree would be compared to an adult human or a human about your age. Go back to the reading. Life science includes the study of a tremendous variety of living things, all with their own unique characteristics. To study and understand the wonderful world of each living organism, we must begin by defining our subject matter and learning the study skills necessary for success. You'll notice that we passed the word organism. It's kind of bold and it's all in capital letters, and that tells us that is a vocabulary word. So let's continue reading where there's another vocabulary word, biology, halfway through page 4. Biology, the study of living things, will require an ability to measure and to organize information. As biologists, we will use a microscope to view one-celled plants and animals, and we will collect some specimens to study the variety of living things. Our experiments and studies will show us that you, the giant blue whale, the tiny amoeba, the ancient bristlecone pine, are all so different, yet they share the same basic life functions. Living things, both great and small, plant and animal, all carry out 8 life functions. Look at page 5, please, and on page 5 we are going to talk about all 8 functions. In the text, there's a definition of each of the 8 functions, while in the yellow margin, there's a picture of each of the 8 functions to help you. Number 1, transport includes the absorption and distribution of chemicals. The blood in your circulatory system does the job of transport in your body. Number 2, irritability may also be called response or regulation. Irritability is displayed when an organism reacts to a stimulus. For example, you look toward the door when you hear a knock. Number 3, nutrition involves the process of photosynthesis in plants and the processes of ingestion, digestion, and absorption in animals. Number 4, respiration within living cells provides the energy for life through the oxidation of food. It also maintains the proper temperature for life. Respiration within the cell is accompanied by external respiration, which in animals is called breathing. Number 5, excretion is the putting out of wastes. Excretion prevents the pollution of an organism's internal environment. Number 6, synthesis is the process by which a creature makes useful chemicals for secretion, regulation, repair, and growth. Number 7, growth is an increase in the size or number of cells. You started life as a single cell. Now you are trillions and trillions of cells, all working together. Number 8 is reproduction. Reproduction is a life function necessary for the species, but not for the individual. In the life process of reproduction, a new individual of the same organism is created. Somehow, all of these life functions are blended together in each of God's creatures. The sum total of all 8 life functions is called metabolism. That's another vocab word. We will study life science for these reasons: to prevent disease, to eat correctly and live a healthy life, to know and understand our fellow passengers on spacecraft Earth, and to preserve life for those as yet unborn. Turn to page 6, please. Section heading, The Scientific Method. Read along with your eyes, please. As part of this course, we will practice using the scientific method, an organized way of solving problems and questions. The steps of the scientific method are: 1. Define the question or problem. 2. Collect data or information through research. 3. Formulate a hypothesis, that is, an educated guess, to answer the question. 4. Experiment using a control to provide a basis for comparison, and a variable group, which is a group subjected to the variable factor being tested. 5. Interpret the results of the experiment and draw a conclusion that supports or rejects the hypothesis. 6. Share your data through written compositions and oral reports. In the middle of page 6, there's another yellow section heading called Controlled Experiments. Let's read that now. Science experiments are designed to solve a problem, to show relationships between observations, or to gather data for future research. The hypothesis is a suggested explanation for something that has been observed. The hypothesis must be tested by a controlled experiment before it is accepted, rejected, or modified. A controlled experiment is an experiment in which most variables are controlled, that is, kept the same. A variable is anything that can change the results of the experiment. In a controlled experiment, one variable is purposely changed. For instance, the amount of fertilizer used to feed various strawberry plants. This variable is called the independent variable. The variable that will change because of the independent variable is called the dependent variable. For instance, the dependent variable in the strawberry plant experiment is how well the plants grow. The dependent variable depends on the changes that are made to the independent variable. In order to be sure that the dependent variable is changing because of the independent variable, all other variables in the experiment must be kept constant or the same. For instance, you must plant the strawberry plants in the same soil, provide them with the same amount of water, and make sure they receive the same amount of sunlight. Otherwise, if strawberry number 1 grows best, you won't know whether it is because of the amount of fertilizer you used, which is the independent variable, or because of another variable, such as soil, water, or sunlight. And the word variable is a vocab word, and unfortunately they didn't put the definition for the variable in the text itself. You kind of have to go to the back of the book, and it is a vocabulary word, so it is in your glossary at the end. Now, variable is, I'm looking at that and I'm actually not seeing it in the back of the book. Well, the variable are all of the different things that can change. So that would be the water, the soil, the temperature, all of the different things that will go into your experiment. Okay, so now we're at the top of page 7, and it doesn't have a new section heading. It just starts with the word finally. So do you see that? So let's read. Finally, in a controlled experiment, there must be a control or a similar test in which no variables are allowed to change. For instance, in the strawberry experiment, the control would be one or more plants which receive no fertilizer at all. The control allows us to confirm that the dependent variable is caused by the independent variable and not by other unknown factors. In our experiments, we will use an 8-part format. And so now we're going to talk about those 8 parts. They are in the middle of page 7 and they are bolded. They are also listed with Roman numerals. So let's take a look at those. Number 1, Roman numeral 1, title. It's a word or a phrase related to the content of the experiment. Roman number 2 is purpose. Several concise sentences that clearly explain why the experiment is being done. Roman numeral 3 is materials. This is a list of items that will be used during the experiment. Roman numeral 4, that's an I and a V, is apparatus, a list of equipment that may be used again after this procedure has been completed. Roman numeral 5 is procedure, clearly listed step-by-step instructions on how to do the experiment. Roman numeral 6 is data, which is neatly organized information obtained by doing the procedure. And this includes charts, tables, graphs, calculations, observations, etc. Roman numeral 7 is questions. Answers to any questions related to the lab, written neatly and in complete sentences. And Roman numeral 8 is conclusion, a brief statement that sums up the results of the lab and indicates that the purpose has been fulfilled. For example, in a lab entitled Testing for Fats, whose purpose is to identify common foods rich in fats, a good conclusion might be, of the foods tested in this experiment, margarine and peanuts tested positive for fats. At the bottom of page 7, there is a section heading called Graphing. It's written in yellow, and so we are going to read the section on yellow, on graphing, listed in yellow on the bottom of page 7. Let's read together. Graphs are a way of showing data in a type of picture. For experiments in your workbook, graphs will be provided for you to fill in the data. When you draw a graph on your own, you're going to follow these steps. I will warn you in advance, these steps may not make a whole lot of sense to you, but we will be drawing a graph in class and that'll help you, okay? So just listen to this and try to understand as best as you can. And for each one of these 6 instructions, these 6 steps for creating a graph, you're going to be looking at the picture on page 8 and try to find what we're talking about on that figure there, and it'll help you understand. Number 1, so these are the steps in making a graph. Draw the horizontal axis about 2 centimeters up from the bottom edge of your paper. Horizontal means from side to side, like the horizon. The independent variable is graphed on the horizontal axis. Turn to page 8, please, and there's that figure sample graph at the top. Number 2, draw the vertical axis about 2 centimeters from the left edge of your graph paper. Vertical means up and down. The dependent variable is graphed on the vertical axis. Number 3, label the axes, that's the plural of axis, label the axes with numbers according to your data. For example, suppose there are 25 spaces on the horizontal axis and that the smallest piece of data is 3 and the biggest piece of data is 10. Divide the number of spaces by the largest piece of data to figure out how many spaces to use per unit of data. So that would be 25 divided by 10 equals 2.5 spaces per unit of data. Use a number of spaces equal to or less than your answer to represent 1 unit of data. For example, I would use 2 spaces for each number. Repeat the calculation for the vertical axis. Label both axes with a title and the units. So look up at the graph. On the x-axis, on the bottom axis, the title is the amount of fertilizer in ounces, and on the vertical axis, the title is quantity of berries produced in ounces. So let's go to number 4. Step number 4. Plot the data with small x's so that the center of the x is at the correct point on the graph. Step 5. Connect the x's with a smooth curve of best fit. Number 6. Put a title on the graph. Put your name, date, subject, and the page number or the assignment on the heading. So let's look at the graph above. The title of the graph is The Effect of Fertilizer on Strawberry Production. At the bottom of page 8 is the final subject heading of this chapter, and it is Using this text correctly. So let's read about that together. The text is a tool for learning and study. Used correctly, your book will help you to do your assignments faster and more thoroughly than haphazard Harriet. She's a student too smart for her teacher. When Harriet does her assignment, she just looks for the answers without actually reading the assignments first and without using the textbook tool fully. If you wish to save time and learn more easily, use each of the parts of the text correctly. So let's talk about the parts of the text. The title page, we already saw that, right? The title page is the first page of a book and includes information on the title, author, publisher, and place and year of publication. This important information is necessary whenever you quote from a book or a report. You should always check the copyright date when using a book to look up any kind of current information. For example, in a history text published in 1988, you will find out that Ronald Reagan is currently president. However, even though he was extremely popular, Mr. Reagan is no longer president. You must use a book with a current copyright for current data. The table of contents, that's the next yellow box on page 9. The table of contents provides an outline of the book with page numbers for each chapter. Use the table of contents to find a general topic in a book. A book's table of contents appears at the front of the book and gives an outline of the work. It is a good place to look to see what general topics the book discusses that interest you. The next yellow square is body. The body is the main part of the book. We're reading that right now, right? The body is the main part of the book, which follows the outline in the table of contents. The body is where you go to read about a topic in depth. The body is pages 1 to 249 in this text. The next yellow square says appendix. An appendix is a part of the text which is found near the end of some books. Appendices, that's the plural of appendix, appendices contain charts, maps, or other detailed information not included in the body. For example, see pages 251 to 253 in this text. So we're going to actually do the instructions. We're going to look at pages 251 to 253. Put your hand between pages 8 and 9 and flip over to 251 to 253. Don't lose your page in the book, so we're just going to look at 251 through 253. And there you can see there are root words and meanings and examples. There are plant uses. I think that's about it. Now, let's look at the next. Go back to page 9, please. And then in the last yellow square, the word there is glossary. A glossary is a micro dictionary found near the back of a book. Use the glossary to define key words when possible, since the meaning given there will fit the usage particular to the subject of the book. If a term is not in the glossary, then use the dictionary and choose the definition that best fits the use of the keyword in the text. In this book, the keywords which are most important to learn and on which you will be tested are printed in all capital letters. All of these keywords are defined in the glossary on pages 255 to 272. All of them except where I think we decided that the word variable was not back there for some reason. Let's do the final paragraph on page 9. Many words used in life science come from the same Greek or Latin root words. If you learn the meaning of the root word, then you will know the meanings of many words. For example, biology comes from two Greek roots, bio meaning life or living things, and ology, which means the study of. Thus, biology is the study of living things. You may see the same root in many other words such as biosphere, biologist, biodegradable, etc. The root words most important for becoming proficient in life science are listed in Appendix 1 on page 251. So that's it for the text of Chapter 1. So I want you to take a quick look at page 251 at the appendix. And that's it for Chapter 1.